Oh, good afternoon, everyone. From the Tech Collective, my name is Monica Corda, and I'm the Director of Business Development here. We are so grateful to have Steve Earle from HCH Enterprise here with us today. We have a huge crowd, so we're thrilled that you're all giving of your beautifully humid day to come and spend some time with us and find out a little bit more about project management. A little intro from the Tech Collective. We are the IT Industry Association. So what we do is we provide trainings and presentations such as this to help our members as well as the Rhode Island landscape really find out more information on technology. So we offer programs in cybersecurity, data, open source, agile, with a whole host of offerings. So please look to our website for more information on upcoming events. Today, Steve has asked that if you have questions, if you would please put them in the chat on the side, and we'll kind of work that interactively. I'll interrupt Steve during the presentation if you do have questions, so please feel free to ask them, and we'll be happy to answer. And we look forward to just having you on and look forward to what Steve is about to share with us. I know it's a chock-full house and a chock-full presentation. So Steve, I will turn it over to you and your expertise.
Okay, Monica, thanks very much. And thanks to everyone that's joining us today. Appreciate your making the time for this. And thanks again to the Tech Collective for inviting me to join in. And as you know, our title is Moving from Concepts to Concrete. We're going to talk about some of the fundamental items within project management as defined by the Project Management Institute. Many of you I know have been on some of the earlier webinars that the Tech Collective has done. So I'm going to be building on some of that. If you are joining us for the first time, I'd encourage you to go back and look at those earlier sessions because that will fill in some of the blanks. And I'm also going to put in a plug for the upcoming session on the project knowledge areas. I am going to be touching on them briefly today, but the next session is focused specifically on the project knowledge areas. So in terms of our objectives today, I'm hoping to help you gain a holistic big picture overview of some of the conceptual framework for project management. You'll hear me use that term framework a couple of times today because that's really what we're focusing on. And after this session, hopefully everyone is going to walk away with at least a basic understanding of the project lifecycle, the major project process groups, and the project management knowledge areas as defined by PMI, the Project Management Institute. Here in North America, the Project Management Institute is pretty much viewed as the authority for setting standards for project management. They are recognized by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute. And for those who are seeking a career or looking to grow in their careers of project management, PMI is pretty much your best bet. There are other schools of thought on project management out there, but if you're looking to advance in your career, and particularly for thinking of getting a certification, you're going to want to get more familiar with the Project Management Institute. So in terms of our agenda today, I'm going to briefly tell you a little bit about myself. We'll review a couple of the project management basics. We'll talk about the project lifecycle and what that looks like to different people. Then the project phases. The project phases are different from the project lifecycle. The project lifecycle can vary based upon the industry that you're in, but the project phases as defined by PMI do not change. We're going to talk about the 5 project process groups, the 10 project knowledge areas, and the 49, count them, 49 project processes. Then we'll have a quick summary and we'll turn it over to questions and answers. And I'll welcome comments at that time as well. So a little bit about me. I'm currently serving as a senior project management consultant with HCH Enterprise. It's a Rhode Island-based firm. We work in healthcare, defense, banking, pretty much any industry you can think of. Personally, I've got over 25 years experience in project management and IT. Most of it's in healthcare. My progression was, I was a COBOL programmer, dating myself there, became a programmer analyst, a systems analyst. I've worked in quality and safety, and then moved into project management. I've been PMP certified since 2004, and happy to say I'm a member of the Ocean State chapter of PMI. If you're not familiar with the Ocean State chapter of PMI and you are pursuing a career in project management or just want to know more about it within your own discipline, I'd encourage you to check into the Ocean State chapter. I'm also a fellow in HCH, the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society, the health IT folks, and the American College of Healthcare Executives and the American Telemedicine Association. I've been a longtime member of the New England chapter of HCH. I'm a past president and currently serving as their advocacy liaison for Rhode Island. In terms of work background, those of you who've been in Rhode Island for a while are familiar with LifeSpare, Care New England, Fleet Bank, which is now part of Bank of America. I was there for a couple of years, and that's really where I got my introduction to project management. And I've also been at Roger Williams Medical Center, the Keene Consulting Group, and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island. I served as a couple of years at UConn. They were putting together a healthcare IT certificate program that I helped them put together and authored a course there. And it's not listed here, but I'm also a member of the International Brotherhood of Real Bearded Santas. So that's part of what I do in my spare time around holiday season. So we're going to talk about some very, very basic concepts within project management. And the first is what is a project? And Rob Massoud from Bryant University did a whole session on that I'd encourage you to check out on the Tech Collective's YouTube channel. But PMI defines it as a temporary endeavor undertaken to produce a unique product, service, or result. Someone have a question? If not, we'll go ahead. Some of the basic questions about starting any project. I'm sure you're all familiar with who, what, when, where, why, and how, the classic questions that a reporter would ask. From a project management standpoint, we'd probably shuffle the deck a bit and say the most important questions are what? What is the project about? What are you trying to accomplish? What is the reason for this project? That would be the why. Is this going to increase profits, improve functionality? Is it going to meet a need? Is it a legal requirement we have to comply with? And how? That's basically going to be your project plan. We know what we've got to do. How are we going to do it? Who needs to be involved? Who are the people that need to do work on the team? Who are the people that maybe are not team members, but who we need to draw expertise from, or we need to work with to get their approval or authority? The when would be the priority. When does this project need to get done? And where? Again, because where you probably know where the work is going to be done. Although on a large project that could be open to discussion. You might be working with offshore teams of people or people in remote locations. But when I say where in terms of the priority, it's very important to know where will this project fit in terms of the overall priorities of your organization. Is this going to be at the top of the list? It's everyone's number one priority. Is it something that would be nice to do, but it's not time critical? That's going to have a very big impact in terms of not only when the work is going to, but who's going to be available to do it, what resources are going to be available to get it done. And in most organizations today, with any complexity, that can change from time to time. I've been on projects that were burning platforms. Number one priority had to be done right away, and then business conditions changed or a new regulatory requirement came out, and suddenly that project got moved further back down the pile, or maybe moved to the bottom of the pile, or possibly even put on permanent hold. So it's very important to know where this project stands in relation to all the other projects within your organization. And that's something that should be reviewed periodically, because what might be your top priority today might not be the top priority 3 months from now. And another basic question, what is project management? Again, Rob Massoud covered this, but the PMBOK explanation, it is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to meet the project requirements. You're going to hear us talk a lot about the PMBOK, the project management body of knowledge, and everybody refers to that, usually referencing PMI's guide to the project management body of knowledge. But it's important to know there's a difference between the two. The PMBOK, when we talk about the PMBOK published by the Project Management Institute, it's not the entirety of the project management body of knowledge, because that's the knowledge within the profession of project management. It includes both published and unpublished materials. And if you've done any project management, or people in your organization have done it, the gray matter you're carrying around includes some of the project management body of knowledge. It's our collective understanding of what are the principles and guidelines that make for a successful project. And it includes things that are written down, things that are not written down. And you notice I said they're widely applied, and the body of knowledge is constantly evolving. When they put together the first PMBOK guide, it was a little over 100 pages. The current version, the 6th edition, is over 700 pages. And it includes a separate portion on Agile. So it reflects the evolution over time as people clarify thoughts. They realize there's things that need to be documented in the guide that might not have been, or maybe the collective knowledge feels we need to make a change here. So the guide to the PMBOK is evolving. They change it every few years. The core of it stays the same. The vast majority of it, if you look back at the 5th or 4th edition, there's not a whole lot that's changed. There's been some new information, and a couple of things have been changed to reflect general knowledge. And the thing I want to stress is that the PMBOK is not a methodology. It's more of a framework, a reference book, or checklist. Although I'd encourage you to read through the PMBOK if you're serious about project management, it's not a textbook on project management. It really describes the framework you should follow. Having said that, if you're going to get certified by PMI, you'll want to thoroughly go through the PMBOK, because when you take the exam, you'll find there are questions that could be answered more than one way and still be correct, but you've got to answer it. So if you're going for certification, you want to get a copy of the guide to the project management body of knowledge. But remember, that's not a methodology. Your organization will develop your own project management methodology. The guide to the PMBOK is a framework and a reference for you to use.
Steve, excuse me.
Yes.
You have a question from Greg Spaziano. How does the PMP relate in terms of PMBOK and PMI?
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the question. Well, the PMP, the Project Management Professional Certification, is granted by PMI, the Project Management Institute. And that's, among other things, your thorough understanding of the PMBOK guide, but it will also ask you questions. If you're going for the certification exam, it will ask questions that really rely upon your experience and your maturity in the project management role. To be honest, years ago when I first became a PMP, it wasn't that much of a requirement. It was a nice to have thing, but people were more concerned about your project management experience and the successes you've had. They're still very concerned about that, but the PMP certification has become far more recognized and more valued with each passing year. And if someone is thinking about project management as a career, or they're thinking about it as a skill set that they'd like to have in their portfolio of skills, The PMP certification from PMI, in my opinion, is very valuable to have. There's also a certification called the CAPM, the Certified Associate in Project Management, and that encompasses a lot of the material that the PMP would, but it's really geared towards people who might in their career or more junior in project management. It does not require as much formal education or as many hours of project management experience. Does that help with your question, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. So the project life cycle, you see the definition there, the series of phases that a project passes through from its start to its completion. And very, very simple level, you start the project, you organize and prepare for the project, you carry out the work, and you end the project. So if you're building a house, you get the idea you want a house, you start planning for it, you have to get approvals, you plan the work, then you build the house, and when the house is, you move into it or the customer moves into it, you've ended the project. So the project life cycle is concerned with the work that needs to be done to complete the project. And as I noted, it can vary greatly between industries and projects. If you're in software development or construction or marketing, the phases that you would have are likely to be very different. But the project management processes are focused instead on how to best manage the project and ideally accomplish the entire scope of the project on time and within budget. So the project management processes are consistent across industries and projects, while the project lifecycle might vary. So just a couple of examples of project phases here. I put an example, and I won't read the whole thing, but if it's a two-car garage, you can think you've got to select the contractor, get the permits, prepare the site, put the foundation in, erect the frame, put on the sides, put the roof on, put in the electricity, install the garage doors, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all clearly defined phases of the project, some of which can happen simultaneously. Many of them have to happen in sequence. You've got to put the concrete floor in before you can build the frame. You've got to have the frame before you can put the roof shingles on, that kind of thing. And in a new computer system, you've got to have your requirements analysis phase, a design phase, how are you going to meet this need, a development phase where you either code the software or perhaps you buy the software from a vendor, debugging the applications. You go through several rounds of testing, unit testing, integrated testing, systems testing, and then you have to train the people that are going to use it. You're going to have a go live phase and a post live support phase, and then a handover to production. So very different phases, but they clearly indicate when you start, when you plan, do the work, and when you finish. So within PMBOK, the guide to the PMBOK, we have these 5 project process groups. You're initiating, you're planning, executing, monitoring and controlling. That's a new one if you look back at the basic 4-step model, and then closing. And this diagram here is roughly similar to the diagram used in the PMBOK guide. I can't reproduce that because I don't have permission for it, but this diagram comes very, very close to what you'd see there. And you can see that basically the initiation process is pretty self-contained. Once you've finished the initiation process to start the project, you're done with it. The same with the closeout processes. Those aren't really dependent upon the other processes. But that big group in the middle there, the planning and executing and controlling, which is a big part of what you'll do as a project manager, those very often are iterative. On a very simple project, like say we're making a cake, the planning and the execution might be very straightforward and they happen in sequence. You plan to bake the cake and get all your preparations together, then you bake the cake and you're done. But if you're developing, say, a missile defense system, chances are you're going to go through several rounds of planning and then executing all the time. That's under the umbrella of controlling the process. So PMI has introduced this fifth group, monitoring and controlling process group, which happens throughout the time that the project is being planned and executed. Here's a graphic example of the 5 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, and controlling, which are often grouped together because they happen simultaneously for the most part, and closing. And you can see that each graph indicates very general idea of how much activity typically is involved as the project goes on, as we go through the project life cycle. A lot of effort involved in initiating and planning at the start, and initiating tapers off fairly early in the project. Planning continues on throughout it. Executing, monitoring, and controlling goes on pretty much through the life of the project, right? And again, I just want to stress that these process groups are not necessarily sequential. Basic concept, you go from initiating, planning, executing, and controlling, and closing, but oftentimes you find you need to go back because things change. If you're doing something very straightforward, like baking a cake, you've done it many times before, yeah, things aren't, you're probably not going to stop and go back and plan some more. But in the real world, it's very common. Things will change. Your initial assumption won't. President Eisenhower, when he was a general, said, "No battle plan survives the first contact with the enemy." For many of us, we know that experience from the work we've done, the projects we've been involved in. So in general, a project process takes this format. You've got some inputs. You use tools, techniques, and knowledge on those inputs to produce some outputs. So very simple design here: input, tool and technique, and outputs. And to use our cake baking example, the inputs are going to be flour, sugar, eggs, milk, other things that you want to put in your cake. The tools and techniques are going to be your oven, your baking pan, your mixer, and the knowledge that you have about how to cook. And the outputs will hopefully be a wonderful cake that everyone enjoys. Or if you're not successful, it might be a big pile of burnt cinders. But you will have inputs, use tools and techniques, and outputs for any process. And here's a sample. This is one of the 49 project processes. This particular one happens to be planning cost management. And you see the inputs on the left. These are outputs from earlier project phases and information and tools that you would gather. The tools and technique would be the expert judgment, your data analysis, and meetings. And the output would be a cost management plan. And this is, not to scare you, but this is one of the simpler project processes. But this basic layout: input, tool and technique, output, that you're going to want to keep that 3-step concept in mind whenever you're talking about a project process. So how does this processes tie in with the project process groups and something else called the project knowledge areas? If we look back at the outputs from a project process, those outputs are usually either the input for another process, or it's a deliverable from the project or the project phase that we're in. And it's important to know that each of the 49 project processes belongs to one of the 10 knowledge areas that we're going to talk about, and one of the 5 project process groups: the initiating, planning, executing, controlling, and monitoring, and execution. So every one of those 49 processes falls into both a knowledge area and a project process group. Some of these project processes are things you'll do once, and that's it. Others are things that you'll be doing over and over and over again throughout the project. It depends on what the project is and how complex it is. You may even find that some of them don't really apply to your project. but it's important to go through that list. And when you're developing your project plan, ask about each of those 49 project processes. Does this apply to this project? What am I going to need to do to make this project work successfully? And the PMBOK guide is really an excellent reference. It's a great checklist for all of the inputs you need, the tools and techniques, and what the outputs should be. So I told you there are 10 project knowledge areas, and the PMBOK guide defines them as being the knowledge requirements and described in terms of their component processes, practices, inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques. And you can see the list of them right there. We are going to go through those, but we're going to go through them rather quickly. There's another session that the Tech Collective is going to have in a couple of weeks on these knowledge areas. So consider this an appetizer that is yet to come. And hopefully you're going to be able to participate in that next webinar that's coming up on the knowledge areas. So we're going to go through them very quickly. And you'll notice, even though I said there's 10 of them, I'm not numbering them 1 through 10. I'm numbering them 4 through 13. You might wonder, why am I doing that? Well, I'm doing that because the PMBOK guide has chapters in the guide, and the first knowledge area starts in chapter 4. So the PMBOK guide references these different processes within the knowledge areas with a sequential. See here, for this one, the integration management, there are 7 processes, and they're numbered 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. That tells you which knowledge area 4, integration management, they're part of. So I hope it's not too confusing that I'm saying the first knowledge area is number 4, because that's the notation that the PMBOK guide uses. And when you refer to anything in the PMBOK dealing with these processes, they're going to have these numbers. In terms of project integration management, this is really the overall management of the whole project. It's making sure that all of the other processes, all of the resources, all of the people are working together. And I'd say this is sort of like the brain in your body. There's a lot of different systems in your physical body that need to work collaboratively in order for the whole body to be healthy. You can't have the heart beating unless the lungs are working. You can't have if the digestive system isn't working. So all the different parts of running a project really fall under this umbrella of integration management. And again, if you're joining us for the first time, I'd strongly encourage you to go on the Tech Collective YouTube channel, look at Rob Massoud's webinars on project. They'll go into the project charter, the project management plan, the different steps in much greater detail. We're a little bit limited on time today, and I don't want to steal any thunder from the next webinar on the knowledge management areas. So forgive me if we go a little briefly on these, but I think it will work out in the long run.
And I did post that link for the next event in the chat area for Natalie Benkovich's area. So if people want to sign up, they can just click on that link.
Thanks. And I strongly encourage you, and I get nothing out of this personally other than the pleasure and satisfaction of knowing that I've given someone else some good career advice. So if your schedule allows, I'd strongly encourage you to plan on attending that webinar on the knowledge areas. So knowledge area 5, the project scope management. This is really critical, knowing what is it, what needs to be done, what is not part of the project and should be left out. You've all probably heard the term scope creep. It's something that any project manager has had to deal with, where we start off saying we're going to do one thing, and as the work goes along, gee, we decided we'd like to add some other requirements to it. Or wouldn't it be nice if we could change this? That's project scope management. And I'll give a quick example of that. If any of you are familiar with the campus of the New England Institute of Technology, they've got a beautiful campus in East Greenwich, and their main building was not built for a college. It was built to be the corporate headquarters of a company called Brooks Drugs. And they had gotten probably 90% of the way through building their new corporate headquarters, and the company was sold to a larger firm. And that firm said, we've already got a corporate headquarters. We don't need this building in East Greenwich. So guess what? That project changed very quickly. It came to a very abrupt end. So managing that work and deciding what to do when the picture changed so dramatically is part of the scope management. The schedule management, name pretty much says it all, but you're going to need to know for each of the things that need to be done on this project. When you break it down granularly, you need to know, when is it going to be done? Who's going to do it? What tools do they need to do it? What sequence did they need to go in? If you go back to our garage building example, you can't put the roof on if you haven't built the frame yet. Estimating the durations. If it's something you've done 1,000,000 times, you can probably give a pretty accurate duration on it. Unfortunately, many of us are not great estimators, particularly when it comes to doing something brand new that we've never done before. That's part of the skill of the project manager, is being to not only estimate as best as humanly possible the time that will actually be required and when the people and resources are available to do the work, but being able to adapt to changes. Number 7 is cost management. This area, I find it varies how much you use this based on the size and complexity of the project. You may have a simple project where the company says, we're not going to need to spend any money. We're just going to use the people we have here. We're going to use resources we already have. So therefore, there's no cost. Well, in truth, the cost is the value of those employees and resources that could have been used for other projects or other purposes. And it's critical, even if you're not spending money outside of your organization, that you know what the costs are going to be and that the key decision makers are aware of that. There's a biblical passage in the gospel about building a tower and saying you would never start to build a tower unless you knew what it would cost and how long it would take, because if you started and had to stop, everyone would laugh at you. So this is a millennial old concept, but very important. The importance of it varies based upon the size and complexity of the project. Quality management is extremely important because you want to make sure you deliver what people expect. You've probably all been involved in some sort of project, either at work or in your personal life, where people get the end result and they're not quite happy with what they got. If you hired someone to build a house for you and you go inside and things don't look like they were built correctly, or features that you expected to have are missing, you'd be very upset. The same is true on any important project you are going to work on. It's important to know what the success criteria are, how that's going to be evaluated, and to monitor that throughout the project. You don't want to get to the end of the project and find out that you're delivering something that the customers didn't want. The best surprise is no surprise. Project resource management. This used to be called human resource management in earlier versions of the PMBOK guide, and that reflects the evolution of this over time. Initially, it was focused just on the people that needed to be involved. And as the contributors to the PMBOK guide met and discussed things, they said, there's other types of resources. It's not just people, but there's equipment, there's buildings, there's land based upon the project we're going to need. If we're building a skyscraper, we've got to have heavy equipment, we've got to have raw materials, steel, concrete, glass, etc. Those are all resources. For most of the projects I've been involved in personally, since I work primarily in healthcare, I'm usually concerned with human resources, the people that are going to be involved in making the project a success. But often it also includes the software. It might be hardware, either IT hardware like workstations and servers, or hardware that's used in healthcare. if you're building a new wing on a hospital, you've got to take in all of those construction requirements. You've got to think about the beds that are going to be used and all the devices, the stethoscopes, and every little piece of equipment that's going to be needed to have a fully functional patient care unit. And I would just stress here that from the human resource side, a very important thing, you see it says develop the team and manage the team. Key criteria for being a successful manager. When we say manage team, you'll often need to be the project leader. You'll need to be the coach, the morale booster, because when things go badly, and that will happen at some point in time on most major projects, you've got to keep people's morale high. You've got to keep people focused. If they run into a dead end, as the project manager, it's a big part of your job to do the blocking and tackling and remove those problems for them. Project communication management. I like to say that in real estate, realtors will tell you the three most important aspects of real estate are location, location, location. In project management, I say the three most important factors are communication, communication, and communication. All of the other knowledge areas are vitally important, but I really think that the most critical one, my personal opinion, is communication. If you're communicating effectively with people, if people are informed of what's happening on the project, the stakeholders, the people that are making the decisions, the ultimate customers that you want to satisfy, if they're aware of how the progress is going, if they're aware of any roadblocks you're running into or problems you're encountering, that's critically important. You don't want to have a surprise for your stakeholders at the end. If you're not keeping them informed through various methods and the project is delivered and it's not meeting their expectations, that's never going to be a success for anyone, even if technically you accomplished everything that was in your plan. There's a lot of human interaction and a lot of soft skills involved here. Project risk management. Also a critical thing to know what are the potential risks to this project. How can we prepare for them? How likely are they to happen? How much of an impact will they have? I don't know if anyone can recognize that distinguished gentleman on the right there, but that man was the captain of the Titanic, and he might have considered before he left Liverpool that among the risks he had to encounter were the fact that the watertight bulkheads that were supposed to go up to the very top of each bulkhead did not, because that was a cost-saving measure. They decided they didn't need to build them all the way to the top because the ship was so sound and so safe. And he also might have thought about the fact that with that known risk, they were choosing to sail through an area where there were icebergs sighted. So obviously, in that case, the project, which was to complete the maiden voyage of the Titanic, didn't work out as planned, a little short-sighted on the risk management. And then procurement management. What's going to need to be obtained or purchased for this project? What supplies, equipment are you going to need? Maybe you need to hire additional staff. Maybe you just don't have the staff on hand to complete the work, or maybe you need to hire expertise that you don't have. There might be things as simple as I need to buy half a dozen workstations for a particular group that's going to use a new piece of software. And I put this cartoon down here, not to knock people in procurement, but it's an example of a real world situation where I've been on a number of projects where we thought, okay, we're going to obtain something, and that's a fairly simple, straightforward thing. We just have to get a purchase request together and get that approved, and we can get the servers or printers or heavy equipment that we need. And it didn't happen because we ran into roadblocks and found out that processes were a lot more complex than we thought in order to procure things. I'm working on a project right now with the state, and I can tell you that the state process for procuring things is very complex. They're doing their job. They want to protect the taxpayers and make sure that they're spending the money wisely, but it's an important area that can't be minimized or overlooked. some projects, procurement may not be a major concern. On other ones, it will be a big part of getting the project done successfully. And I've seen several projects where everything went swimmingly. The people worked hard. You had intelligent people that gave it their all. But the Achilles heel was that there was some item that needed to be procured that they thought would be simple and straightforward. That wasn't. So that's also a very important part of project management. And the last formal knowledge area that PMI identifies is stakeholder management. And stakeholders are people that are either going to have the power to positively or negatively influence your project, or the people that are going to be positively or negatively impacted by your project. So in terms of the example I gave earlier of adding a new wing to, say, a medical center, your key stakeholders are likely to be the chief financial officer, the chief executive officer, the chief of medicine, the heads of the medical departments that will be in that wing. Certainly the chief nursing officer includes people from the physical plant, maintenance, anyone that is going to be able to either help or hinder this project, or who's going to be impacted by it, is a stakeholder. So very critical to know who your stakeholders are, especially who your major decision makers are. And there's a term called the sponsor, which is usually the person who is championing the project at the highest level in your organization. And again, if some of these terms are new to you, I'd encourage you to go back and go through Rob Massoud's webinars, and they will help you to understand all of these concepts. And I would just add here again for the stakeholder management, where we talked about the sponsor and some of the key stakeholders, some of the people that are most critical to your project. I said that you needed to be a cheerleader and be focused on the morale and encouraging people when times get tough. Those key stakeholders, particularly your sponsor, are going to be critical, because on a complex project, you're going to run into walls that need to be knocked down in order to move ahead. And as a project manager, you may not have the power individually to make that happen. That's where you need to go to the CFO or the CEO or the head of your department, someone who's got more power, more authority to help you remove those roadblocks or move things along when you're not able to do that by yourself. So very quickly, we've gone through the processes, the 5 process groups, and the 10 knowledge areas. And you see this quote up here, again from the PMBOK guide, that in addition to the process groups, each of the 10 knowledge areas is an identified area of project management defined by its knowledge requirements and described in terms of its component processes, inputs, tools, and techniques. It's part of that framework that you need to be thinking about whenever you're putting together a project plan. And those 49 project processes, those 10 knowledge areas, are going to be used on most projects you're involved in. But it will depend upon the project and your organization how much you're focusing attention on those processes and on those knowledge areas. And in some projects, it will be something that consumes very much of your time. In others, it can be something that you pretty much just have to check it off. I've got to do a couple little things here. I gave the example of a small project where maybe you don't have to spend any money. Well, your cost planning is going to be minimal there. As opposed to building a new wing on a hospital, there's a lot of costs involved in that. So based upon the project and your organization, these are knowledge areas and process groups, and the individual project processes are going to vary in terms of their importance. But it's very important that you go through each one of them and consider that in terms of your project. And I'll stress again, if you're thinking of getting certified as a PMP or a CAPM, it's very important to not only know these 49 project processes, but to know which knowledge area they are in and which process group. I guarantee you there will be questions about that on the PMI exams. And if you have the PMBOK guide or have access to it, page 25. Make a copy of that, plaster it up someplace where you're going to see it. And there are a few things I'd say to memorize, but that is one worth memorizing. And as you grow an understanding of the process groups, the knowledge areas, and the individual project processes, it will be a lot clearer to you why they're in a certain knowledge area or a certain process group. Here's one example. I couldn't give that page 25 in the PMBOK guide because, again, I don't have the right to copy that. But here's an example. If you look at a couple of knowledge areas, project integration management and project scope management, it shows you which project processes within the 5 process groups fall into each knowledge area. So you'll see if you go to the PMBOK guide, look at page 25, you'll see a really nice matrix that lists all of the process groups, all of the knowledge areas, and all of the project processes. So in summary, we talked about some project management basics, the project life cycle, the project phases and how they can differ from one industry to another, the 5 project process groups, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing, the 10 project knowledge areas, and I'll put in one more plug for that upcoming webinar on project knowledge areas. I really hope you'll be able to take advantage of that, and the 49 project processes. And if you're taking an exam for either the CAPM or PMP, make sure you know those processes and which knowledge area and process group they belong to. And that's all I've got. I'll open up for questions and comments. And if anyone is an experienced project manager that would like to chime in on any point, please feel free to do that as well. And I apologize, I can't see the questions in the chat, but I'll rely upon Monica and to share that with me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Steve. That certainly wasn't like you were like, that's all. That was a lot of information. I'm sure people's heads are reeling from a lot of new information being presented to them and coming at them. Right now, I don't have any questions in the question box, but I did post. We ask if everyone could just take a moment. It's a 1-question survey just to kind of tell us, did we hit the mark? Did you receive what information you were hoping to glean today? So we do have a comment from Sadok. He wrote not a question, but a comment. Excellent presentation and very well done. Greg Spaziano also wrote, good job. I know Greg has been at all of these presentations, so he's putting you in pretty high regard. He's seen all of the ones who have come before you, Steve. So
I know Greg, and Greg, that check will be in the mail right away.
Oh, see, excellent. I didn't even have to know that part. The presentation will not be available for download, but we will probably in about a week, it will be posted on our YouTube channel, Tech Collective YouTube channel. So if you look there, Sadok, it will be there for you as well. So if anyone has a question, I'd ask that you type in quickly now. And we'll see if we can get Steve to answer. I see that he's put up some reference information. And certainly, as he said, Natalie Benkovich from APSO will be presenting on August 26th for those content areas. So we hope that you can join us on that call as well, or other presentations by the Tech Collective. Kriusa has just posted in there the link for our YouTube channel as well to make it nice and easy for you to. Varuni wrote, thank you so much for your information. Well done, Steve. So thank you kindly for all of your kind words. Denise, I'll have to read this since Steve can't see it, but she wrote, great job as a real bearded Santa. Can we hear a ho, ho, ho?
Ho, 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 ho.
Namoda put in thanks, Steve, as well. So lots of thank yous.
Very much. Thank you for everyone who joined us today and attended, and particularly I want to thank Monica and Cruz at the Tech Collective. They got thrown a curveball at the last minute with some changes to Microsoft Teams, and they managed to scramble and get it to work. And I really appreciate all of your hard effort to make this happen.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure. I'm so glad that you were able to present for us as well as this whole group. Federico, he'd written, wasn't able to open the YouTube channel. So if you go onto YouTube and just search Tech Collective, I believe we're the only ones. So you'll see we have all of our videos up from presentations during this COVID season. They're all up there. So I thank you all for attending. I hope that you've had a wonderful time here, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Tech Collective event. Thank you.
Thank you,
May
everybody.
your summer go swimmingly. Thank you, folks.